Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Marcus Yanscombe. I'm the Technology Chair for NAGAP, and thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We're joined by Mark Cunningham. He's the Executive Vice President of Client Solutions and Strategy for Carnegie Communications, and we're very pleased to have him to talk to you a little bit more about digital strategies and things in a moment. So we try to have these regular webinars to have you learn a little bit more about best practices and the things that are really up and coming in graduate enrollment management. And we're pleased to have Carnegie on board as one of our partners. So Carnegie is an annual partner for us and has partnered on us with the Graduate Colleges and Universities Service, and he can tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the session. But we're really pleased to have them on board, and in addition to the types of partnerships that they provide, they also like to provide some best practices for us and really try to offer some opportunities for our members to really grow and be able to utilize their own strengths on their own campuses to grow their programs. So we're really pleased to have them. Just a quick logistical note, if you have any questions as we go throughout the session, Mark has opted to take all the questions at the end, so hopefully you'll be able to get a lot of depth during the session. But if you have any questions, you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen there's a questions box, and you can enter any questions that you have right there. We are recording the session, so we will put the video up on YouTube, so you'll be able to access through our NAGAP.org YouTube channel. So we'll send that link out to you, and we can make the slide deck available for you as well. So as you see, the title of this session is Influencing the Prospective Grad Student's Journey Online. And Mark has been with Carnegie for 6 years and oversees strategies provided to colleges and universities across the country. And if you haven't seen a Carnegie session before, you're going to get a great session here, and obviously a lot of great information. So we're really pleased to have Mark and Carnegie on board. So without any further ado, Mark, take it over.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, Marcus, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're excited to present some of this information in terms of just the kind of role that some of the online behaviors and information plays with a lot of what we can be thinking about in terms of graduate recruitment marketing and enrollment on the graduate side. So I did want to start out just mentioning that we've actually been doing some workshops across the country with our partners at Google. We've actually got one happening next week down in Texas. And a lot of this information and some of the data and insights and strategy comes from our partnership with Google in terms of the information that we have access to and that they provide to us. So a lot of what you'll see here actually is from some of the relationship that we have there with our partners at Google. So I did want to start with just the overall concept of the fact that in today's environment, in today's world, we don't simply go online anymore. We literally live online. Everything and almost every aspect of our lives is involved with some sort of online activity or behavior to some extent. It really has taken over just about every aspect of our lives. And when we think about the amount of people that are spending their time online, over 3.1 billion internet users worldwide is what's happening in today's environment. So these are kind of some of those almost no-duh type numbers and stats here that we see, really getting to the point that this is a very significant theme that we need to be thinking about in terms of how we think about some opportunities for us. But what are they doing online? They're spending their time online. All these audiences ourselves are spending their time online doing a variety of different things. They're obviously doing a lot of time searching for different things. They're watching video. They're on their mobile devices, right? This is one of the crazy stats that I couldn't believe, and I wonder if I kind of just thought about my own behavior during the day. If I was actually checking my phone 150 times a day or spending 177 minutes per day on my phone. But that's the average that's happening out there in today's environment when we think about both online and, in this case, across mobile. But yet a lot of the way that we're reaching these audiences or marketing to these prospective student audiences and influencing them still isn't very reflective of that. If you look at kind of the time spent across each of these channels, if you will, and the budgets allocated to, or just the focus of marketing efforts allocated to these channels, it's still not really in line. It's certainly shifting in that direction, but a lot of schools and organizations still have a long way to go in terms of just the way that they're focusing their attention in terms of really reaching and influencing the prospective audiences that are most relevant and important for them. And it really comes down to, when we use that word kind of influencing, as we have in the title of this webinar, it really comes down to winning the moments that matter. So there's so many moments as audiences are spending their time online throughout the day that are these little moments that matter in terms of our opportunity to get in front of them and present the opportunities that we want to make sure that they're aware of and engage with. Our friends at Google are constantly doing different types of research and reviews and analysis, and one in particular, this is just from the end of the year last year, is around the impact of search and the influence of search. And when we say search, we're talking about online search that we're all doing day in and day out. And as we think of the recruitment perspective, from a recruitment perspective, and these audiences, particularly at the graduate level, that we do need to be thinking about in terms of how we can make sure that we're getting in front of them, it's important to think about the fact that 90% of them are starting with an open mind, right? They're typing up google.com and entering in some of their searches. They are going about some of that exploration, not necessarily with a particular institution in mind. They are wanting to explore what some of those first steps and opportunities could be. And especially as that's further out in the cycle, if you will, or even the funnel, if you will. As they are further out in that, that's that unbranded type of search activity that starts to happen, right? They're searching maybe by programs or area of interest. They're not necessarily searching on a particular school name or quote-unquote brand. And so as that relationship, if you will, that online relationship starts to form with them in their heads, and they start to narrow down what they're thinking about from an opportunity standpoint, and as they get closer and closer to their decision points, that search behavior starts to shift less from unbranded to branded search. And that's an important thing to think about as you kind of think of the full spectrum of how you need to be making sure that you are simply present in those search results. When we think about programs, this again is some of the data from that research from Google, but this is some recent data in terms of just some of the program-specific search behavior that's happening in today's world. So you see certainly a lot of significant activity happening across a variety of programs here, but potentially more importantly, you also see a lot of growth activity happening here in terms of some of the search terms that are related to these programs. So as you look at this slide and think about the programs that you have to offer and the audiences that you might be looking to get out in front of, this is something to keep in mind in terms of some of the activity that's starting to happen online when it comes to search. Similarly speaking, with degrees, you can see some of the amount of activity that's happening by degree in terms of search volume on Google, as well as the growth that different degrees are experiencing here as well. So these, again, are all types of things that are important to keep in mind when crafting any sort of plan for making sure that you're accomplishing what you want to in search results. I mentioned the mobile stats before in terms of just what audiences are doing in general, but when it does come to searching on mobile devices, this is something that really needs to be thought about a lot more today than it was even very recently. Mobile search volume is increasing very significantly while desktop searches are decreasing. And so that's important to think about for any type of strategy and way that you're wanting to get in front of some of these types of audiences in terms of the types of devices and the types of action that you're potentially expecting or wanting them to take. Because the action that they might take on a mobile device or be able to do on a mobile device, and it's simply where they are in their research process, might be different than if someone's sitting down at a desktop. So that's something to think about in terms of these stats and these numbers that are starting to happen. And in fact, a little over a year ago, what Google calls the mobile moment actually happened. And that's actually on May 5th, 2015. That's the date when mobile searches overtook desktop searches in general. So, so now more people are conducting searches on mobile devices than on desktop. A lot of times when talking about any sort of recruitment marketing or efforts, the word conversions are used in a variety of different ways, whether we're talking about micro or mini conversions or soft conversions, or certainly more deep conversions in terms of applications and registrants and things like that. But it's important to know that when we are just using the simple kind of concept of conversions, 78% of converters, if you will, I say that in quotes a little bit again, but of converters are influenced by search in some part of their journey they were doing searching related to that, to what they were quote unquote converting for. So that's something to think about as you go a little bit deeper down in the funnel. I think I used this phrase before, that it's simply a matter of being there. So if prospective audiences are searching, it's critical that you are simply there. And if you're not there, there can be a lot of issues with that. So, and these numbers aren't specific to higher ed, but they should get us thinking about some of the potential opportunity or missed opportunity if you're there or not there. A lot of searchers are discovering new companies or new opportunities that they weren't necessarily looking for just by the mere fact that those are appearing in their search results. You have the opportunity to be there when they're potentially searching for something else if you're getting it right when it comes to that type of behavior. So you have the opportunity to get in front of new audiences that perhaps thought they were wanting to explore a certain type of direction, but now that they've been made aware of yours based on you being the answer to their question, as Google would put it, then you have the opportunity to perhaps influence a change of mind there, or a shift in mindset there as well. And simply just the overall brand awareness. If you are there in search results, then the overall brand awareness of your institution, of your programs that you offer, whatever it might be, goes up significantly. So when we think about some of these concepts, there's a few different kind of buckets that we put things in, and you'll see kind of summed up at the end, but it's what we call kind of the 5 who's of digital. And so one of the first who's that we can kind of consider here is the who doesn't know you. And this is a lot of what I was just talking about in terms of search. It's those active EDU searchers who are online searching for things and have the opportunity to discover you if you simply can get yourself there. And so that's when we need to start thinking about kind of that real estate that is there in those search results. You'll hear it sometimes termed as the SERP, the search engine results page. But there's really a lot that goes into how and if you appear on these, and some of this might be kind of 101 type information, but there's a lot that can be considered. The first way, and this is very much more prevalent in graduate than undergraduate in terms of strategy, but becoming more and more a thing in undergraduate efforts as well, but is pay-per-click advertising. And so if you think of those results pages on Google, it used to be that there were paid ads on the top and paid ads down the right side, and actually Google has eliminated that. If you look even just at the last slide that I was showing with the layout of things. And so it used to be that there was a much more real estate when you were thinking about opportunities for pay-per-click, but it's actually been condensed, and it's a lot fewer spots to make sure that you're appearing based on the keywords that certain people are typing in. So when you think about a pay-per-click advertising strategy or approach, there's a number of different pros to taking this, and there are things that can be done on your own within Google and AdWords to conduct this type of thing, and implement a pay-per-click strategy. And it really is a great opportunity to make sure that you're accomplishing some immediate results, particularly, and this kind of is going to the bottom bullet, if you're not accomplishing what you are needing to from an organic perspective, pay-per-click can make sure that you are there right away if you're not on the organic side. It also can make sure that you are taking a more campaign-oriented approach in the sense of creating kind of that calendar of messaging, where it can be around specific events or deadlines, and certainly highlighting specific programs as well. On the con side, it certainly can be very costly. One of the most expensive keywords out there in general, not just higher ed, but in general, is MBA. So if you are trying to go about a pay-per-click effort and getting it wrong, then you can be wasting a lot of money very, very quickly. So that's something to very much keep in mind. So there's a lot that can go into kind of constructing that, that type of effort. When you are thinking about developing a paid search strategy or pay-per-click strategy, these bullets here represent really what should be considered. This would be like if I'm making a list, I would write this down to make sure I have each one of these checked off in terms of the keyword strategy or the pay-per-click strategy that you are implementing. So everything from all the keyword research that needs to be done, and all that data is available within Google in terms of a lot of the keywords that might be relevant and appropriate for the audiences and programs that you're looking to advertise. Ad text copy is critical. That landscape that I mentioned before in terms of the change that Google recently made where the ad results only come up on the top, means that it's much more critical for you to have the right type of copy appearing there. There are now, because of that change, expanded opportunities to go even deeper with what you are saying there. So you can expand upon the descriptors that are in there. You can have site links that go to different destinations on your website. And so you just have opportunity to represent yourself differently today than you did even 6 months ago in terms of the ads that you are writing there. There actually is a way also, there's a keyword insertion capability where you can even make the title of your ads fit what the person was actually searching for, even if that's what not what you originally titled your ad. So that it really is that one-to-one, I am now answering what this person is searching for, if it's literally coming up with what they searched on. So, but all of these things really come into that checklist of what you should be thinking about if you're putting any strategy like this together. I mentioned SEO before on the organic side. So I do oftentimes talk about kind of putting yourself in their shoes. And I say that when we're talking about the mobile experience. I say that when we're talking about just the advertising experience in general, your website, but particularly here, so when we're talking about paid search or SEO, I would say one kind of recommendation would be to take a step back and put yourself in the shoes of the prospective student audience that you would be looking to get in front of. And what are those keywords that they are likely to enter in, and especially at that unbranded stage of things? And how do you appear in those search results? So check that. Because as you can see here, if you're not on the first page, then you're pretty much don't exist. And even if you're not in the top 3 in some respect for those search terms and phrases that you really are feeling like are relevant to you, then it's very unlikely that they are even going to click on your results. On the organic side, this isn't even talking about the paid search side. So it's critically important to make sure that you're getting these pieces of the equation correct as well. And this is all again going into influencing that prospective student's journey. And just to kind of echo this, when we do think about even just the vastness of results are out there, if you just type in MBA on Google, there's over 260 million results. So, and that's obviously a very broad term in a very broad sense, but it gives you some idea of just of how much is out there. So if you're not getting those strategies right, it could be very harmful. We do have here at Carnegie, we host and do webinars just about every month, and we recently did one on SEO, and as it's put here, you see the top 5 SEO punch list. So these webinars are recorded and free on our site. Just gives them nice planning and areas to think about for you or members of your staff that may be more involved with SEO type efforts, but it's a nice kind of free half-hour webinar that you can take a look at that will give you some tips if it would be helpful. To give a bit of idea of the impact that getting some of the organic SEO stuff right, and this is a kind of a low-hanging fruit example, but this was a school that was looking to accomplish some things differently this past fall, and they were working with resources that didn't necessarily enable them to go kind of big splash campaign type thing, and so it really was can we clean up the backyard type conversation. And just by simply fixing some things on the organic SEO side, in terms of making sure that they were appearing for some of the specific programs that they were looking to promote, they saw dramatic impact pretty much right away, which is actually a little bit atypical of SEO type work in their applications and ultimately enrollment. And this really was the primary thing that was changed in terms of what they had done versus in the past. So you can see the immediate impact by just having you appear where you need to be and be there when you're thinking about those search results. But search isn't everything, right? If you think about all of us in our normal day-to-day online lives, we're not searching all the time, and as you see here, 80% of our time is spent doing other things. So what are those other things? It could be checking Boston.com for me. It could be spending time on social media. It could be watching videos. So it's important to think about kind of the outside of the search landscape opportunity to, again, influence that prospective student's journey. So we get to that second who. So this is who you don't know. So there's obviously large audiences out there that that you don't know who they are yet. and you have an opportunity to get out in front of them and create awareness about your programs, and more importantly, create interest and get them to hopefully engage with your institution and the programs that you have to offer. At Google, they essentially can reach 90% of the internet in terms of the vastness of their display network. And so display network meaning the opportunity to get in front of and advertise in front of audiences while they're just simply spending their time on the websites that they do day in and day out. And so there's literally the opportunity to really get in front of just about everyone worldwide when you think about some of that 80% of the time not spent searching. And when you do think about display, it does have a very significant impact. By just getting your brand out in front and creating some of that awareness, Google sees a lot of change and bump in some of what that means in terms of visitations to a site and that demand creation, as well as just simply to search on that branded search, which is a much more conversion-oriented activity that's going to happen. If you're now getting them to a point where they recognize your school, your brand, your programs, and they're specifically searching on that, you are now the answer to what they're looking for because of that brand exposure that you had accomplished through display. So oftentimes these really do work together so that the search is kind of catching what the display or some of those other marketing efforts are pitching. And an important concept to think about, and a kind of a scary one. Every time you see an ad online in today's world, there's a reason. So if you think about your own online experience and the ads that you see when you're on whatever websites you might be spending your time on, the ads you now see are very relevant to you and who you are and the searching and surfing behavior that you demonstrate online. That's just simply the nature of today's advertising kind of efforts, if you will. So there's a variety, and you see them, a number of them listed out here, of kind of tactics or targeting capabilities that go into why there's a reason that you're seeing every ad that you do online. But it enables people in our roles to really make sure that we're getting in front of the right relevant audiences. And so that's kind of the good news side of it, is very much that you can make sure that the programs that you have to offer, the audiences that you need to get in front of is very much matched up as best possible because of some of the targeting that goes into online advertising today. In addition, when we think about that kind of who you don't know, you can actually reach audiences that you don't know based on those that you do. So if you have lists, whether it's past enrolled student lists or prospect lists that you essentially know that these are the right types of audiences for who we need to reach and reach more of, even just based on your website visitors. The IP addresses of your website visitors can really craft a profile of an audience so that you can see everything down to the demographics and characteristics of those website visitors that you have and create audiences that look like those. So both those, whether it's those enrolled student or prospect lists or the lists of your website visitors, can be used to build out profiles and lookalike models to reach new audiences as well. So there's some really kind of cool new ways that are happening now that you can really make sure that you're connecting it to data that's already very relevant and important for you. Location is another theme that's out there quite a bit in today's digital environment. When we think about kind of getting in front of the right audiences and influencing them across their online journey, a lot of that does come down to being able to get in front of them based on where they are from a location perspective. And two of probably the most common ways that this is accomplished in today's digital world, one is referred to as rooftop targeting. So at the graduate level, if you think about some of those feeder locations, those feeder institutions that you might draw from, there's the ability to ride in literally on the network of those feeder schools or whatever it might be, businesses, hospitals, and have your school and your school's ads get in front of those audiences that are spending time on those networks. So we see a lot of graduate schools take a look at that in terms of really kind of drawing out that list of places that they draw from and whether or not rooftop is something that makes sense for that. Another kind of buzzy term that's out there, shiny new toy type concept is the concept of geofencing. And this really comes down to mobile. And what geofencing enables you to do is draw a virtual fence around any type of location and essentially start building and constructing the mobile audiences and essentially the mobile devices that are entering and then ultimately leaving that fence. So again, if you think about some of those locations that you might draw from, some of the types of opportunities in terms of events going on, that sort of thing, those are all things that can be considered as you think about, okay, well, who are the audiences that we want to try to reach and influence? and does it make sense for us to draw any sort of fences and capture those mobile audiences. We see this most successful around opportunities where you can have kind of that fence in existence for a longer period of time and really start to gather and construct an audience, like a feeder school that you might draw from, versus a very short time frame, fair type thing. I mean, it still technically can be done, but where we see the most success is kind of where you're able to really construct a real audience, robust audience for delivery, either while they're there or also after they've left. So we can't forget about social media, of course, when we're thinking about reaching those new audiences, those who you don't know, as well as even some of the other who's. We'll talk about social media a little bit as well. But certainly when we think about why should we be thinking about social media and why would you use social media for some of your recruitment marketing efforts, there's a variety of reasons, as you can see here, that all make sense when it comes to whether or not you should be incorporating some form of social media into your strategy and plans. But the primary reason I would say just why use social media or potentially use social media is this is where so much of our audiences are spending their time in a variety of ways. So there's certainly all these elements that can go into the reasons behind it, but it really, again, just comes down to the massive audiences that are spending their time on a variety of different social media platforms. One of the big ones, obviously, is Facebook. You might see or hear people chatter out there about how audiences are fleeing Facebook. That's still really not the case. And especially when we do talk about strategy for social media and Facebook in particular, the way that audiences can be reached, constructed, really provides some great opportunities across Facebook, and we've personally seen it have some really good results. And you can see here some of the demographics of Facebook users that are out there. So as you think about some of the graduate programs that you offer, this is some of the type of information that's important to look at in terms of whether or not Facebook in particular is a platform that we should be considering as part of our overall strategy. As I mentioned, it does provide a variety of different targeting criteria, so you can get very granular with Facebook in terms of the audiences that you are getting your ads in front of. And Facebook now actually offers some lead generation advertising opportunities, so it's very easy for that audience who is the right person to simply engage and identify who they are in literally just two taps. So it can be a very easy experience, and again, when we think about mobile, that can be even more impactful there as well. I was mentioning that lookalike audiences from your lists before. The same concept can hold true for Facebook. So off of the email addresses and other information that you might have from any list and any audience that you're managing, Facebook has all this information where they can find essentially people that quote unquote look like those audiences too. Instagram, now owned by Facebook, you can see some of the data here in terms of the demographic and audience breakdown. So it's, again, to kind of be one of those situations where you're taking a look at some of these demographics and the audiences that are spending their time there. And all those targeting capabilities are very similar or pretty much the same as what can be done on Facebook can be done on Instagram as well. LinkedIn. There's certainly an assumption that LinkedIn is great for grad, right? And so we've seen LinkedIn work in some cases very well and in other cases not as well. But there's a lot of opportunities to reach audiences in different ways on LinkedIn, and it's probably better served for certain types of programs and audiences than others. You can see from a targeting perspective, there is a variety of ways, especially at the professional level, that you can work with LinkedIn to make sure that you're getting the right type of audience in your plan. And there's a variety of different ways that your ads and your message can appear to the audiences that are spending their time on LinkedIn. Whether we're talking about sponsored updates, so that appears as one way, a little bit more heavily branded within the LinkedIn experience, or what's called text ads, which is just a little bit more of a kind of snippet, if you will, in terms of their LinkedIn experience when they're on that site. And there's also InMail, and you can see here, InMail is one that certainly has some limitations in terms of kind of barrier to entry from a budget standpoint, and this is a LinkedIn thing in terms of the opportunity to get in and run any sort of InMail campaign. So whether or not you have that opportunity, that's obviously a big decision-making point in terms of approaching the sponsored InMail direction of a LinkedIn strategy. I put the demographics on Twitter. on here as well. I don't have them in this presentation, but we also have some of this type of information for Pinterest and Snapchat as well. So if you are thinking about any of these social media platforms, again, one of the biggest things is just, okay, who are the audiences that are spending their time there? What are some of my opportunities to get in front of them across that platform? And does that platform make sense for us with the recruitment that we're trying to do? But as you do think about building out a strategic plan specific to social media, I would say just write down these 5 bullets and answer these for yourself in terms of your plan specific to social media. And when you have the answers to these, that will help you say, okay, well, these are the platforms that do or do not make sense, and these are the types of tactics within those platforms that do or do not make sense. So, so this is kind of the cheat sheet that I would recommend as you think about kind of putting that plan together. And certainly, you can imagine that this type of plan doesn't necessarily need to be specific to social media. I mentioned YouTube and that huge number of video watching that's happening online in today's world. This certainly represents a great opportunity from a branding perspective for colleges and universities and graduate in particular in terms of experience and branding is video. And you can see here some of the stats that are involved with YouTube and some of the higher ed specific information on here in terms of the impact and influence that that video does have in that equation. And there's a variety of different ways for you to have a presence on YouTube. You could obviously have a YouTube channel where you've got different videos for your institution that are on there in a variety of ways. But there's also, in terms of advertising on YouTube, you can get out in front of audiences in a few different ways so that they experience you, your brand, and your programs and however it makes the most sense. If you are thinking about doing any sort of advertising on YouTube, one cool thing to think about is that actually you only pay when a user chooses to watch your ad. So if they skip your ad, even though you might have gotten some branding accomplished just by the mere fact that a few seconds of it did play, you're not paying for that view. So that's kind of a benefit to any sort of video strategy that you might have. Obviously, when talking about video, you need to have video assets to be able to use, so that's a critical factor. But if you do, then YouTube, certainly there's a lot of ways to accomplish some things. And the impact that it does have, and we'll keep using that word influence, when someone does choose to watch your ad, they are 75% more engaged than those who kind of can't skip, those types of ads that you can't skip. So the ones who actually are able to skip but choose not to, that's a hugely valuable audience that you're able to accomplish via video. So I wanted to move on to the third one, which is who knows you. And again, as we kind of think of the opportunities for influence across kind of the different audiences and themes here, we've talked about kind of who doesn't know you, who you don't know, and now we're talking about those people who actually do know who your institution is or the programs that you have to offer. Those are the people that are already essentially demonstrating some intent, and primarily what we're talking about is demonstrating intent by simply being on your website. They know who you are. They're exploring information about the programs that you have to offer and the experience and that they can get and all that type of information that's available on your website. But what's also important to keep in mind is that of all the great traffic that your website is experiencing, 98% of that traffic is leaving without them doing what you want them to do. In other words, again, convert. And sometimes, and many of those that are kind of going through some of those initial steps of quote-unquote conversion are leaving without finishing that. And when we do think about that conversion theme, again, it's actually you're needing to get them there upwards of 4 or 5, sometimes 10 times to your website back and back again before they actually do what we want them to do. And in many cases, that's simply identify who they are. So retargeting certainly helps with that. So in today's world versus a few years ago, most people are familiar with what retargeting is. We're all retargeted in our daily lives. You go to a website, you leave that website, you get advertising for the website that for a variety of things that the website that you're on has. So for me, the amount of travel that I do, Southwest, Marriott, I have those types of ads coming up. And again, that's every time I see an ad, there's a reason type thing. But it does help with that frequency of message. It does help with getting visitors to come back to your website and convert. So it's an important layer and very inexpensive layer of making sure that you are staying out in front of those audiences. Also important to consider is if they're on your website, they're likely on several other websites that you might compete with. So if you're the one that's staying out in front of them after they've left, you are giving yourself a better chance. Retargeting is very easy to also be, some use the term dynamic, segmented, bucketed, based on where they were on your site and or the level of intent they essentially demonstrated by where they were as well. So whether that's at the program specific level, and so if someone's on one particular program page versus another, gets a certain type of ads as they go after they leave their site versus the other program, that all can be done very easily. As well as if they've kind of gotten to a certain depth on your site in terms of more information, financial aid, all that type of stuff, the ads can be catered more towards that type of behavior as well. So it's very easy to make sure that your retargeting is very much not a one-size-fits-all broad brush approach. Retargeting, or remarketing as termed by Google, can also be done within pay-per-click or paid search. So if I'm someone who has been on your website and I'm now on Google and I'm searching for certain types of things that are related to the pay-per-click strategy that you have, you can actually have unique bidding, keyword bidding, and even messaging appear in those search results based on Google knowing that I'm someone who has been on your website before. So versus just if I was just someone searching in general and you didn't have this set up. So it's really great, and we see this immensely helpful when we do talk about conversions. If I'm someone who's already familiar with your brand, I've been to your website, I'm now searching on relevant types of keywords and phrases, and now Google knows that I'm someone who's already been on your website, we now can serve up an answer very unique to that experience and that history. You can also take a look at those lists of people that have been on the website and their search behavior, and you can find similar audiences and make sure that the pay-per-click ads and strategies that are happening for those audiences that have been to your website are also able to happen for audiences that look like that. So, so that look-alike has started to become a theme here in terms of reaching new audiences as well. I've already mentioned, so standard retargeting, RLSA, or remarketing lists for search ads, that's essentially pay-per-click retargeting. But also across all of those social channels and platforms and YouTube, forms of retargeting are capable with throughout those as well. So so that's something to think about as you think about kind of, again, that frequency of message, where they're going after they leave your site, and the impact that you can have. It's really a strategy that can be applied across all areas of the web. So this acronym, it's been, if anyone's been to our Carnegie conference in the past 2 years, they'd be familiar with what this acronym means. But when we're talking about any of this type of effort, really also make sure when we think about those people who know who you are, by engaging with some of the marketing efforts that you might be doing, by clicking through a search app, by Googling you and clicking through the organic experience, by clicking on any sort of advertising, it's important to make sure that you have the right destination for them to arrive at, and that it's accomplishing for you what you want it to be accomplishing. We've talked to schools where they just say, oh, just send people to our main.edu, and okay, well, what do you want these people to be doing? So that's critical, and there's a variety of things that go into what makes a good landing page. But really, it's just important that it's answering the question of what do you want them to do? Do they know what you want? And is it easy for them to do this? I would also make a quick reference back to the mobile conversation as well, and think about this type of experience, especially from a call to action and an RFI, or request for information form. Be thinking about it both across desktop and mobile as well. But if you're able to get this right, and if you're able to get kind of that attention, what our friends at one of our other partners who presented this acronym call the attention ratio. If you get that attention ratio down to as close to 1-to-1, in other words, I'm now on this site, and what they're wanting me to do, or what I want to do, is this one thing versus 20 different site links and areas that go on the page, or 20 different things to do within that page. If it's as close to that 1-to-1 as you can get, that's where you start to really see a nice lift in terms of the types of conversions that you'll experience if you've got the right destination or landing page experience. A quick example is this all kind of comes together. If you think about kind of that influencing throughout that path, right? It's you're thinking about that journey of that prospective student, and them thinking about some of their first research steps and conducting some of those searches and building some of the awareness that might be needed for the programs that you have to offer that people might not be aware of, for making sure that you're re-engaging them and staying in front of them. All of these work together in kind of a comprehensive approach to making sure that you're influencing these prospective student audiences at each step throughout that process. And so you can see here, just in the case of Ursuline, with some of the approach that they took in integrating some of these strategies, they saw a really big lift when they started thinking about these things in kind of that concept versus just taking things kind of, okay, I'll do this here and this here type thing. They really thought about things from a student journey standpoint and making sure that everything was working together. So real quickly, the who you know component. So these are the prospects that you already know who they are. So it could be a prospect list based on people having identified themselves on your website. It could be a list that you're purchasing from a name source, or name resource. It could be any sort of list that you might be managing when we talk about kind of those audiences that you already know who they are. One of the more recent tactics that's available now to reach these types of audience and make sure that you have a digital complement to something else, anything else you might be doing with them already, is what's termed as IP targeting. And what this simply is just that you can take the street addresses of any audiences that you're managing, and you can marry that up with the available IPs. And then you can just simply deliver advertising throughout the household of those lists while they're online. So it could be those individuals as well as any influencers that are on within those households that you're reaching across all devices. And again, that could marry up or complement some email marketing strategies that you might be doing. It could be just standing on its own. But there's a variety of ways that this could be considered to be applied, if you will. So we see it at all stages of the funnel that it having an impact, and that's one of the kind of good news elements of IP targeting is that the minimum size list for being able to do anything like this is relatively low. It's typically around 3,000 or so that you can do a list off of. So there's a variety of applications that it can happen throughout the funnel. And one thing that we've seen at the graduate side is schools using it for taking some of their alumni lists and going at them with some of the graduate opportunities that they have to offer as well. So that's even another list that can be considered for that. This same type of list-based approach can be thought about across certain social media platforms as well. So that can be thought, so you can marry up the data that you have on those individuals with the social media handles and information that they have and reach those audiences one-to-one across social media platforms as well. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of who, as I term it, who you'll get to know. A lot has changed in terms of data availability and analytics when it comes to any sort of digital strategy and how it's working. I think that's been a big missing or not neglected piece, but just something that's been an opportunity for development over the past few years, is really making sure that you're able to demonstrate ROI, really measure conversions and activity, and get a good sense of what's working and what's not. And that's really a lot of the advancements that are happening in today's environment. Certainly Google Analytics plays a big role in that. This again is another checklist, I would say, just in terms of overall health of anything that you're doing, whether it's anything digital or just in general, and how your website is performing. If you don't have access to your Google Analytics or a comfort level of being in there and taking a look at some of this type of stuff, these are some of the kind of the general things that I would recommend you taking a look at, or asking the person that would take a look at this type of stuff to take a look at if they're not already, and providing you with kind of reports or information on this. But these are the types of data and analytics within Google that you can see that will help you get a better sense of, okay, are the efforts that we're doing, are they working? Are they leading to more traffic on our website? Are we seeing more happening with mobile versus desktop? Are we seeing visitors from the right places from a geographic standpoint? Are more people searching for us and then getting to our website because of that? And are we creating more traffic based on new visitors versus return, or vice versa? So all of that can come into the overall kind of picture that's painted in terms of what's available in Google Analytics. You can even have dashboards set up so that you have kind of this set of information that you continuously want to make sure that you're monitoring, and those can be customized and kind of at the ready for you whenever you're needing access to them. So you're not kind of constantly going here, there, and other places within Google Analytics to pull in 16 different pieces of information. Dashboards can be constructed so that you have your own kind of customized reports, if you will, for how your websites are doing. One of probably the biggest advancements today is really just being able to kind of really demonstrate the ROI of things and get down to the identified person level. So there's a lot that can be done from an enhanced data analytics standpoint to be able to say that, okay, I'm now Mark Cunningham. I filled out this RFI form on your website, and so now that I'm identified as Mark Cunningham, you can now see all the history that I've had with your marketing efforts and what I've been doing on your website. So that picture is painted so that you can see that I've been to these 4 pages on your website, I've interacted with these marketing communications, and so that can inform your decision either specific to me or specific to a larger audience of Mark Cunninghams, if you will. So at that identified level. So that all those kind of dots are able to be connected in today's world. You can also get this information, not down to the name, but information on kind of what's working, what's not working with people who have not identified themselves yet. So those audiences that are spending time on your website and navigating around, interacting with different marketing channels that you might be doing, that picture is all able to be painted as well. You're just not down to the identified user, but that picture does tell you, okay, our mobile strategy is working, our social media strategy is working, this page is experiencing great results for these types of individuals or these types of audiences. So all of that information can now be really put together and tracked and used for future marketing efforts and decisions. It can help you with segmentation, so you can even take audiences that have identified themselves and you know certain things about them based on their behavior on your website or within different marketing channels, and have that inform your decisions for different segments of the identified audience or those unidentified audiences as well. So whether we're talking about segmentation or just simply their experience on your website, the ability now is out there so that you can say, okay, for someone that is coming to our website that we now know is a grad-oriented person or interested in these types of programs, their experience on our website can actually be personalized and catered to the fact that we know that now. And so it can all be very much start to get down to a very personalized and influenced journey for those individuals. So just to sum up on kind of the 5 who's theme, as you think about this role of influence across online and digital channels for the audiences that you care about, this could be a good way to kind of really just organize it in your head as you're thinking about strategy and approach. The who doesn't know you yet, the who you don't know, the who knows you already, the who you know, and then finally the who you'll get to know with some of the advances in analytics as well. And it really just starts to impact this funnel or this journey or this path, and thinking about where each of these strategies can apply at what level of that path, and then of course thinking about it at the conversion level. So what are the types of conversions and calls to action that we want to have applied, and what's realistic for us to expect with certain audiences as we're influencing them at different points in that journey. And so are we talking about micro or macro conversions in terms of that expectation and that end result? So those are all things that are very important to keep in mind. And of course, the influence of devices throughout this consideration is something to be thinking about as well as you're working out that overall kind of online journey, and the ability to influence them is, okay, what does that mean in terms of how we're approaching things from a desktop, tablet, or mobile perspective? So I believe that's the time that we had set aside for today. I did want to say thank you, and as Marcus mentioned at the beginning, we did want to also open it up to any questions that might have come through while we went through this information. I did just want to reference again the partnership that Marcus had mentioned between both NAGAP and Carnegie Communications. A primary area of where that was born and has been developed is actually through Carnegie's lead generation services that we have at the grad level. And so with the partnership, part of the benefit of that partnership is anyone who's involved in the is participating in the lead generation services that we offer does actually get a discount as a NAGAP member. So that's just one side benefit that happens as part of the partnership. But again, I did want to very much thank NAGAP for inviting us to be a part of this presentation today, and certainly look forward to any questions that I can answer for anyone that might have any.
Thanks so much, Mark. That was really great information. We have a few questions here. We did mention earlier, we can share the slide deck with everybody, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So we'll send that out to everybody so that you have the slides and the video we're going to provide on YouTube, as I mentioned. Here's a question for you, Mark. What are the best strategies for improving your search position on Google?
So I would say I would probably refer back to, and I'll just simply kind of refer to one of my colleagues here who ran that webinar that I referenced. And it's funny, I had a slide in here originally that had kind of those 5 basic steps, or some of the 5 first and key steps to improving your search position on Google from an organic perspective. And so I could share that slide with whoever asked that question, or even put it back in before we send out the presentation to others. But I would probably more recommend that webinar that I posted. It's a 25-minute webinar, has our Director of Digital Analytics walking through exactly that question, the answers to that question. What are some of those kind of both big rocks and low-hanging fruit that can be looked at as some of those first things that can be considered for improving those results. And again, that's a free webinar just to take a look at.
Great.
So I hope that answers the question without answering it.
Yeah, if you want to tuck that slide back in, maybe we can make sure that's included for everybody. That's
I absolutely will, yeah.
Of all the content strategies, which would you say are the top 2 best performing ones for online graduate programs?
From a content strategy standpoint, for graduate programs, so a lot of what we talk about is really making sure that, as I was mentioning before, it's kind of are you the answer to Google's question? I hope I'm answering this right. And again, it might be that someone else here at Carnegie is better served to get a little bit more into the specifics about this. But making sure that you are building out that keyword strategy and looking at the data that Google has to offer. That Google has a ton of resources as you think about content. To be able to make sure that you are appearing as you need to in those search results. So it's thinking about making sure that the keywords that are within your web page are consistent as best possible throughout any and all other experiences. So when you're thinking about the way people would search, but as you also think about the kind of linking to your social media platforms and the content that are in there. One of the biggest things that actually can be a hindrance on content is duplicate content or duplicate pages. So if you have within your website a lot of pages that essentially are saying the same thing in duplicate, that actually can hurt you quite a bit. So making sure that you're just doing some general cleanup from a content perspective. I used that case study example where they just did some kind of backyard cleanup of content and website, and it had immediate impact. And it was kind of easy with the nicheness of their program, but the best content strategy, I would say, is just to initially do some cleanup based on some of the information and recommendations that are available from Google or folks like my colleagues here. But that's the easiest thing to do, and that's the easiest way to have an immediate impact, is just to simply get some things right, technically speaking, and clean up from things like your site architecture and the deduplication of content and that sort of thing. Those are immediate things that will give you lift.
Great. And so this question, for a smaller graduate program that does not have a large advertising budget, what would you recommend as the first thing they should focus on?
It's a great question, and it's a loaded one. I would say it definitely very much depends on the goal. So if the goal is that we need to make a splash and we need to create more awareness about this program in general, and it's not so much kind of people in these seats tomorrow type thing, then it might be that we're leaning more towards that kind of display and who you don't know, kind of, but within a very appropriate kind of geographic scope. But if it's very much we need people in these seats tomorrow, then it might be more of a pay-per-click strategy, that if it's a small program with a modest budget where that perhaps can be done in an effective way where you're not breaking the bank based on the keywords that could be out there for it, but simply you just need people to capture those people who are right now searching for those types of programs that you offer, and it's a more conversion-oriented strategy, then that's probably the direction I would lean more. But it's one of those questions which we all hate the answer to, where it depends. But as you saw, actually, even just to answer that question a little bit, that was a little bit of the conversation that was being had with the example I used, where actually what was identified was the best thing to do first was to take a look at their SEO and their presence in the organic search results and just clean it up, and that had a dramatic impact. So again, it kind of depends, and I hate answering it that way.
Okay, and this question I think is a little off the topic of the webinar, but I think still relevant enough that you might be willing to answer it, Mark. But what is the average open and click-through rates for grad program emails in a CRM? Do you have any kind of guidance on that? And then what should this person ask? What should I be striving for as a successful metric?
So we don't. So I'm sorry. We have the answer. I don't necessarily have the answer to that. But if I'm remember what the average is, I believe it's in the low teens for open rates and like the 2 to 4 for click-through rates. But I actually could be misspeaking there. So so I'm happy to confirm, and whether it's that individual or in general, make sure I get an answer to that question for you as well in terms of what is out there from an average open and click-through rate as well as what we see in general.
Great. We have a few more minutes for questions if anybody has them, and one kind of general comment based on feedback we received here, Mark. Some folks, this is new to them, so there might be some opportunities for us in the future, whether it be through the web platform or even blogs or something at the national conference, to talk a little bit more deep dive on this on a kind of one-on-one level, and kind of give everybody the basics and maybe break it up into some smaller pieces so people understand kind of the terminology and the technologies behind that, and kind of do a deeper dive. Yeah, we'd be happy to, and I think I used the term at one point, kind of 101 level type stuff, and there's definitely a lot of this type of stuff where we often are giving sessions, presentations, and conversations, whether it's a specific area, like one of those kind of bucketed themes, if you will, a specific tactic or strategy, whether it's social media and or search or whatever it might be, and starting from kind of the base level of, okay, let's define kind of what it is in today's world, as well as some of the kind of best practices and things to be thinking about. So we're happy to kind of take whatever direction would be helpful for anyone. Great, thanks. And there's one question that just came in, kind of similar to what you talked about before, and I guess if you had a genie in a bottle, it sounds like if you could do only one strategy, what would you suggest somebody do right away to have the largest impact on application numbers? I mean, so I hate to answer kind of the one strategy like I was saying a little bit before, but if it's really, if we were saying literally almost rank priority when you talk about kind of boosting application goals, I would say at the grad level and program specific level, a solid pay-per-click strategy done right would probably be the kind of the first conversation I would have around that. I'm not saying that that's definitely what would make sense in each case or whatever, but that potentially, based on the wording of the question that you asked, I would say probably a solid pay-per-click strategy would be the first thing that we'd think about. Great. Again, it comes down to the theme of, if they're searching and you're not there, you don't exist. And so if you're just making sure that right away you're making yourself exist within the search results of the people that you need, and particularly driving towards an application, then that's moving a big rock right away. So. Great. And I think this was Emma's question, at least in my own experience and talking to a lot of colleagues in the field, to do it inexpensive and do something that's really impactful, not only do you have the pay-per-click option, but utilizing retargeting as well is really helpful. So those two strategies together can really have a great impact. It does. I mean, I use that stat of so many people coming to your website, not doing what you want them to do, leaving without identifying who they are, and retargeting, especially from a low-cost perspective, is, I mean, that's almost automatic with any conversation we have, just to make sure that you're staying in front of those audiences that are, as one of my colleagues always puts, non-compliant prospects who are just constantly, on your website exploring, learning, or whatever, but you don't know who they are yet. So that helps a lot. Great. Well, I think that's all of our questions for now. Mark, I just want to thank you again for all your time, and certainly the continued partnership with Carnegie. We appreciate that here in NAGAP. And for all of you that are on the line, we appreciate your time this afternoon and for coming to the webinar. And please, if you're interested in submitting a proposal potentially for next conference, and I'm hoping Carnegie will be doing the same, we will have our next webinar on how to create a proposal for a conference session. That's coming up on Tuesday, August 2nd, so in a couple of weeks at 2 o'clock Eastern. So we hope you'll join us for that. So thanks again, and thanks, Mark, and we look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.